Hello, hello. What is up, my people? It is good to see all of you smiling and beautiful faces this spring morning. It is March 27, 2019, and this, you already know, this is the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. I hope all of you out there are having a wonderful, wonderful start to your week. We appreciate you so much for joining us. And let it be known right off the top that we are men of our word here on this fine program. My main man, Marc Raimondi, the other half of this show, he is in Japan for one championship week, and it is the middle of the night, and he didn't even want to be here today. But we told you all that we are going to work and wake his happy ass up, and we are going to talk some MMA. And damn it, that is exactly what we're going to do. The hardest working man in the business, the California King himself, Marc Raimondi. What is up, buddy? How's that 10-hour plane ride sleep treating you?
I'm living. I'm alive. It's 2 a.m. in Tokyo. I've slept for probably a grand total of 3 hours in the last 36 hours or so. Honestly, I don't even know. I have no idea what time it is anywhere else. I mean, I have a vague idea that it's 10 a.m. Eastern Pacific because it's the A side. It's Wednesday morning, but it's Thursday in Japan. I'm in the future. I'm in the future. So I'm confused. I'm jet lagged. I'm exhausted. I'm thirsty. I'm drinking some vending machine coffee from Tokyo. But other than that, hey, I'm happy to be here. Gotta do it for the people. For the people.
You had to give the people what they want, and you are a trooper. You are letting it happen.
Is this even working? I'm in a hotel room in Japan. Are we really live right now? Is this happening?
Hopefully the internet is holding up. That was kind of the issue, and we're working through it. That was why we were a little late today. There's been some technical difficulties trying to get this set up. Hopefully we have it figured out. Let us know on Twitter if it's working for you guys, and if there's any issues, we'll try to fix them. We're going to just try to give this a shot and see if it works out. So, hey, man, safe to say there
are people watching, so I'm hoping that this works.
Safe to say there is a lot to discuss today. Conor McGregor is back in the news for mostly the wrong reasons. Anthony Pettis, that man is suddenly a top-ranked welterweight contender. Justin Gaethje and Edson Barboza are about to do crazy, crazy things to each other on Saturday. Plus, you know, this one championship debut of Demetrius Johnson, Eddie Alvarez, that's a few days away. That's why you're in Japan. All of that and more today. But as we always say, this is your guys' show. So we are going to talk about whatever else you want us to talk about. You can ask us a question on the MMA fighting page below. Any question that gets 3 recommendations, those will turn green and get priority. Or you can ask us a question on Twitter using the hashtags TheASide or chat rappers. Replay the show goes up immediately. You know how it works by now. YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, etc., wherever else you get your pods later today. Also, we're having some feedback that maybe Spotify might not be working anymore. We're not on Spotify. If that's the case, let me know, because that's not okay. We're supposed to be on Spotify. We'll figure that out. And with that said, let's do this, man. Let's do this. Also, I want to note, I don't know how this would really get out there, but if you're watching on the MMA fighting page, refresh the page. We had to switch the video out. This message goes to nobody that's gonna it's gonna help, because if they can't watch it, they're not able to see this message. But refresh the page and the video should work. In the meantime, Marc, you ready to do this? You awake enough for me to
I'm as ready as I'll ever be at 2 a.m. after a 12-hour plus flight.
All righty, let's start with our main man. This one's coming from Ultra Run on the MMA fighting page, who wants to know the big topic of the week. Conor McGregor, what is going on? Shaun and Marundi, the S&M guys, what is going on with Conor McGregor? He writes, number one, it sounds like the retirement might be a negotiating tactic, but it's already been used, so how effective is it? Number two, 2 weeks ago when McGregor smashed the phone, the media consensus was that it wasn't that big of a deal in and of itself, but the larger picture was troubling. Jumping a cage, pushing a ref, smashing a bus, etc. Now there are allegations in the New York Times. Just what is going on with Conor McGregor? So that's a simple question, Marc. I will throw it to you first.
A simple yet loaded question, Shaun.
Conor McGregor is once again in the news for all of the wrong reasons, and this has just become this is just how we talk about him at this point. This is the pattern. This is the trend. What is your reaction to a busy, 72 hours for this man?
Yeah. So let's start out with that first question from Ultra Run about the retirement tweet. So I guess it was late Monday night, right? That McGregor tweeted that he's decided to retire. He tweeted he's making a quick announcement and he's decided to retire. He's hanging up from mixed martial art, no plural, just the one. And that was it. It was a tweet that took. I mean, Twitter exploded after that tweet, and I would say the consensus was that most people didn't believe that it was true, but I have no idea if it's true or not. And we've people are not believing in this because we've seen it before with him, where he tweeted in 2016 that
the camera just caught me mid gulp, and I'm pretty sure I just looked super strange on camera. But
that's totally fine. That is the correct response to me jabbering at 2 a.m. in Tokyo in front of a laptop.
I was trying to sneak in some caffeine while you were talking.
That's all good. That's all good. So yeah, so we remember the iconic 2016 tweet when the UFC pulled him from UFC 200. Thanks for the cheese, catches later. I've decided to retire young. Yada yada yada. So I think most people feel like that the retirement tweet is not legit, although it's hard to say for sure. Does it have to do with his contract status and his negotiations with the UFC? I don't think there's any doubt about that. That also doesn't mean that he's not being truthful. I mean, it could be a legitimate retirement. It would be a power play, but certainly McGregor has the ways and the means to step away from MMA at this point in time, given all the money that he has made. We'll get to more of the nitty gritty of that stuff and the ESPN Plus deal, the pay-per-view stuff later on. Second question from Mr. Ultra Run is this legal issue, this thing that the New York Times reported on Tuesday, that the Irish police is investigating Conor McGregor for alleged sexual assault. That is an extremely, extremely serious report and an extremely, extremely serious allegation. Again, we don't know if it's true. We don't know. He has not been charged with anything right now, and there's a lot to be seen. But for the New York Times to publish something of that gravity about Conor McGregor from Irish police sources, I would imagine this is a very serious thing. This is a very, very serious thing, Shaun, and it's a little bit interesting to tackle for us because we don't know all the details. I know there's a lot of stuff that's been said on social media. I know that apparently WhatsApp in Ireland has been going crazy about this for a few months, but we really know very little as far as what can be seen and what there is evidence of. So it's a tough one to deal with. And bottom line, and I know I've been talking about this for a few minutes already, but it's. I mean, I hope it's not true. If it's true, it is a very serious thing, and it would be an awful thing if it's true.
Yes, a lack of sleep has definitely not made you any less loquacious, my friend.
I think it probably makes me even. I can probably just talk for like an hour and a half. It won't make any sense, but I will just be talking.
I'm willing to go down that road with you. Now to sort of address the topic at hand, I'll start where you left off with the allegations, because I think for both of us, and not even just us, but for a lot of people in the media, maybe not even media, but just a lot of people in the MMA space, this rumor about this story and discussions about this story have really been pretty out in the open at this point. These conversations about this story with Conor in Ireland for the past several months at this point. I mean, I don't think that this is anything surprising to maybe a big portion of people who are really, tuned into the MMA world and sort of in this bubble. The way that it works with Ireland libel laws is there has been a story about this basically for the past several months, but they have always needed to refer to Conor as a famous Irish sportsman or something of that way, because they can't name someone accused in a crime like this. They can't publicly name them because of just the way the legal system works over there. So this has sort of been out there for a while. So I saw people when this came out say, this is old news. This is old news. This is nothing new. I think it is noteworthy, though, that the New York Times has been able to actually identify and name Conor in this story. That alone makes it extremely newsworthy, because obviously, like you said, it is too early for us to there's too much unknown about this for us to actually, decently comment on it, responsibly comment on it. It's difficult to talk about this in that regard, but it is extremely noteworthy that Conor has been named in this story now. He is now linked with this story as opposed to it being anonymous. And then, I mean, it's certainly not a good story, man. You hope that it's not. You hope that none of this is true, but I mean, it's hard to say one way or another right now. I'll address the first part now, the retirement issue, which is a very hard segue to make from the sort of issues that we were just discussing. But
before you go into that, Shaun, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to add one thing, because the timing of these two things, they happened less than a day apart. They were like, I mean, really 12 hours apart or something like that. The retirement announcement and then this report from the New York Times. McGregor's spokesperson, Karen Kessler, said in a statement yesterday that these two things are not linked. The retirement announcement has nothing to do with this story the New York Times published. So that is worth noting. Now, that's what they're saying. I believe them. I don't think they're linked in that way. They may be linked in a different way, if that makes any sense. But I don't think that Conor McGregor tweeted that he's retiring because of this story possibly coming out a day later.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say though that, you know, man, geez, like before I even visit the retirement conversation, this man has now been arrested 3 times in the last year. Like, that's just the facts of the situation.
Yeah,
it feels like every time we talk about Conor, it is increasingly less about actual fights, about actual MMA, about anything that matters, and it's more and more about what this guy is doing in his personal life, where he is, his various forms of legal trouble. Obviously, the phone smashing issue, I was among the chorus saying that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it's not something you want to do, but it's not the biggest thing in the world. But it is just getting so tiresome that this is the conversation now that we have with Conor. I said this a couple weeks ago, but I wish we could go back to him talking about him fighting, because that's the only thing that really, I don't know. I'm kind of I'm kind of on a tangent here, but it's just tiresome that this is sort of the conversation now that we always have to have with Conor McGregor. As for the retirement tweet, I don't think anybody really saw that as a legitimate form of retirement. I mean, you know this guy as well as I do. You know his proclivity for bombast, for big spectacle. You think that guy is going to announce his retirement with, "Hey, just a quick announcement, guys. Just want to send out this tweet real quick." Like, he just saw GSP have a press conference for himself. He's going to want to do something of that magnitude if he's actually stepping out of the game for good, for certain, if this was a 100% retirement. I mean, we have heard this now the past couple of months where he's been trying to negotiate, figure out what his return's going to be in the UFC. We didn't want to give him a main event. It came out that you know, they were looking at July and they wanted the heavyweight title fight to main event over him. And me and you have talked about this. I mean, that's an absurd thing to lose a Conor McGregor fight over. I mean, obviously Conor McGregor will headline over the heavyweight title fight. He's the biggest superstar that we've ever had in this sport, one way or another. Like, that's just a silly conversation. But this just seems like a further way to perpetuate and negotiate in the public, right? Because we've seen him revisit this well before, we've seen him revisit this well before, and now he's just revisiting it. I don't know, though, that it's going to be nearly as effective as it was the last time he did it, because the last time he did it, he was at the peak of his powers. Now it really feels like he's starting to become more and more of an ancillary figure in all of this.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess it goes back to that old saying, follow the money. Because we've been talking for weeks about how the UFC apparently wanted Conor McGregor to be the co-main event of that July card. And I said myself a few weeks ago, like, that couldn't possibly be true. But as this situation has continued to develop, it seems pretty clear to me that the reason why they want him to be the co-main event is because if he's the main event, they probably owe him a lot more money. That's probably what it comes down to. If McGregor is the main event, there's probably something in his contract that says he gets X amount of kickback from pay-per-views or what have you. That is most likely the reason for them wanting. It's not about the title or the, you know, having the title be the main event. That's all conjecture. That's all BS. It's about how much money they probably owe Conor McGregor for being in the main event. You
think if they went to Daniel Cormier and was like, "Hey, man, Conor wants to headline over you. Do you have any problem with that?" Do you think Daniel would say for 1 second, "Yeah, no, I need to headline over Conor McGregor. He would jump at that opportunity, be like, yeah, no, I'm good. Just put me on the
Daniel
card.
Cormier would make that face that he did at the press conference when they said Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Cormier. His eyes would light up, and he would go, That's what Daniel Cormier would do if he heard that he was on the undercard getting pay-per-view points on a Conor McGregor pay-per-view. And speaking of that, let's segue into this pay-per-view points thing because, and I don't know this for sure, but I can only speculate that this stuff with McGregor and the new UFC deal with ESPN, where they basically sold the rights to their pay-per-views to ESPN, they're putting a paywall behind a paywall. And it stands to reason that fighters who get pay-per-view points, who get a cut of that revenue, are not going to make nearly as much as they used to. And who is hurt the most by that? Conor McGregor. Yeah. Because that guy is the biggest pay-per-view seller of all time in the UFC. And he was making a huge chunk of his money from pay-per-view sales. And even if he were to get the same amount in terms of percentage on pay-per-view buys that he got before this new deal, there are going to be less pay-per-view buys. There's no doubt about it.
Significantly less pay-per-view buys. Like,
because again, it's a paywall behind a paywall. You have to subscribe to ESPN Plus in the United States in order to even have the ability to buy a pay-per-view. So there will definitely be a steep drop-off. 75% of people who watch UFC pay-per-views do it from their home, from their DirecTV, their Comcast, their Time Warner, their cable system, or their satellite system. And now that is all gone. So that is going to be a steep drop, which means Conor McGregor is likely to get a steep drop in revenue from those shows as well.
Yeah. Before we move on, let's exit with this. If I was to put a number on it for you, maybe not even a number, but if I was just to put a gun to your head, say, will Conor McGregor fight this in 2019? Yes or no? Considering everything that's going on right now with these negotiations, his retirement, quote unquote, also these allegations that are now in the New York Times report, what would you say? Yes or no?
If you would have asked me that 48 hours ago or before that, late last week, I probably would have said pretty good chance that he would fight in 2019. Now I don't know, man. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I would say I don't think so because of all the factors mentioned before. And just to go back a little bit to this New York Times story, the alleged sexual assault, even if that is not true, you're right when you say we're talking more about Conor McGregor's outside the cage stuff than we are talking about him fighting. And there was a time when Conor McGregor was this great story, right? He's a kid who picked him up from his bootstraps. He was a plumber in Dublin. He grew up in a tough area. He was on welfare. And literally 3 years after being on welfare, he was making millions of dollars in the UFC. He was a national hero. And he reached a pinnacle, of course, and now it seems to be on the decline, unfortunately, with all these outside the cage issues. And I just wonder where did it all go wrong for him? McGregor, knocks out Jose Aldo, and he's the king of Ireland, and now there are columns being written wanting to disassociate him with the entire country by newspapers over there.
Not even the Aldo fight, but like think about where we were with him right after Eddie Alvarez, right after New York.
Even then.
Right after New York, where he had just been on this incredible run, and he had the Aldo thing, the Nate Diaz back-to-back, two of the biggest pay-per-views of all time, then becomes the first two division simultaneous champ. Like we were talking about him in rarefied air that really is an extremely exclusive company. Like we were talking about him as one of maybe potentially by the end of his run being one of the greatest fighters ever. And I feel like that conversation will never return. I don't know that. I don't know. I feel like I agree with you. I mean, where we've reached with him is really unfortunate.
Yeah,
because he was at one point a really incredible story.
Yeah, it is a shame, and hopefully it all works out. But if you ask me on March 27, 2019, what Conor McGregor's future is in mixed martial arts, I have no idea.
Yeah, I would still, to answer my question I posed to you, I would still put it maybe 52% to 48% that he will fight in 2019. But
that is awfully specific, Shaun. Awfully specific.
I'm just saying a little bit. I sway a little bit that way, but it's becoming less and less so as the days go by. So
fair enough.
But let us move on. There is still a lot left to discuss. So let's go to our good friend Secret MMA, who has the next question on MMA fighting. He wants to know which fight is more likely to happen next. Jorge Masvidal versus Ben Askren, or Jorge Masvidal versus Leon Edwards? And so, Mark, this is sort of revisiting a topic we talked about a lot last week. We have had now a week to let this all breathe, let this all develop. And that's sort of what sits to be out there right now. It seems like Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal is the fight that Dana White wants to do. Does not seem that that's the fight that Jorge Masvidal wants to do. What should happen?
Before I answer that, I just wanna chime in with something else here. So last week we talked a lot about Masvidal and Edwards and that whole extracurricular activity after the fight in London where they got into it and 3-piece in a soda. We know the whole story already. And I posted our clip talking about it on my Instagram account. And I regret that quite a lot because I didn't realize how many people were very passionate about. So basically, I mean, the conversation was this, Shaun? I mean, you were there. It was we were trying to reconcile our mixed feelings because I mean, Jorge Masvidal, this is, I mean, we love the guy. I mean, this is, we're really attracted to this guy and what he's doing and his personality and his charisma and his fighting ability. And it speaks to us, yet we're talking about someone who also landed 4 punches on a dude in backstage. You know, he assaulted someone and battered someone essentially. I mean, he's not charged with a crime, but that's kind of what it was. You know, say what you will. And I'm not, look, all I said was this mixed feelings because I'm here for 3-piece in a soda, but also, you know, in any other sport that would be deemed as ridiculous. So what we were talking about, you know, what does that say about us as MMA fans and as people who watch the sport? And the freaking venom, that I got, the venom on Instagram. My mom follows me on Instagram, my man. These comments were really horrible.
Let me guess. It was a bunch of people telling you to stop being a little baby.
I'm a cuck and I'm whatever. I mean, so many different. I mean, I don't even want to go into how many things they said, but my mom reads that, man. Come on, show some respect. I was just trying to give a measured argument, and there's no room for freaking nuance on the internet. There's just no room for nuance in MMA on the internet at all. God.
My mom reads that.
She does. She's on my Instagram.
Well, I mean, commenters are going to let your mom know what they think about you, frankly. I understand.
I don't want my mom reading that. My mom needs to follow me on Instagram because I never text her. So she's like, please post onto social media so I know you're alive. I'm not even kidding. That's what my mom tells me. I never text her call. So she's like, just post on social media so I know that you're living.
Marc Raimondi, you should contact your mom. You should talk to your mom right now. This is an intervention. When this show is over, call your mom and tell her you love her.
We'll see. I do love you, Mom. She doesn't watch this show, but I love her.
Well, I don't blame her for that. But hey, Jorge Masvidal, what are we thinking here? Ben Askren, Leon Edwards, something else? What's going on at this point?
I have no idea. I mean, it does seem like at this point over the last week, it seems like the Askren fight has a greater probability of happening than the Edwards fight. I feel like the Edwards fight, initially it was very hot. Of course, they had that altercation, but I feel like it's kind of lost. I
feel like it's lost momentum, right? Like
absolutely.
I was on this program last week, and then even the post-fight show for London, saying that was the fight I wanted, and I kind of have changed my mind at this point. I feel like that's lost momentum and it's kind of fallen out of the conversation, if you will. Like Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal sounds really nice right now. Just the way that the dynamic between those two guys.
I feel like Masvidal has a ton of momentum, and I don't know if fighting Leon Edwards, again, all respect to Leon Edwards, I think he's fantastic, but I think Masvidal needs to fight someone above him in the rankings. I know the rankings don't mean anything, but above him in terms of stature and name. I mean, drawing ability. And Edwards would be below him in that regard. So I think that I'm here for Masvidal Askren if that's the way they want to go.
My question to you, because I agree with you, but at this point, considering what just happened this past weekend, and we'll talk about it in a second, it was Stephen Thompson losing. If you're doing Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington, Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal kind of sounds like a #1 contender fight at that point.
It is. I mean, it has to be, right?
I mean, I don't know that it has to be because Jorge's 1-2 over his last 3, but the way he got that one was very impressive. And if he was able to do the same to Ben Askren, I would not mind getting him thrown in there with the winner of Usman versus Covington.
Yeah, I mean, nothing has to be a number one contender fight because we know how these things go. You can win the interim title and not get that shot, but it certainly does sound appealing. And if you would have told anyone 6 months ago that the next welterweight contender might be the winner of Jorge Masvidal versus Ben Askren, woo, two like Bellator OGs, that'd be interesting.
Oh man, Jorge's the one that got Toby Amada, right?
That's right. That inverted triangle standing up.
That's like one of the best.
We've come a long way. We've come a long way since then.
No kidding. That's like one of the best Bellator highlights of all time. Still,
yeah.
And he's on the wrong.
Their first season.
Yeah. But hey, I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out because it feels like Jorge doesn't want that fight, but maybe the UFC will sweeten the pot, and that's what we'll get. Let's keep it moving, though. We have a lot to talk about. And so let's talk about this past weekend, man.
Yeah.
Anthony Pettis' amazing knockout. And this question is coming from the GOAT 124. He writes, has Anthony Pettis found a new home at welterweight, or was his win against Wonder Boy just a fluke? Also, I like that he put Wonder Boy with a space between Wonder and Boy. It's 2 words. That's interesting. Can he really last against the other welterweights with his size? And what the fook is wrong with Conor, spelled wrong, McGregor? He just can't seem to stay out of trouble. Like always, Shaun Al-Shatti rules. Marc Raimondi is surrounded by a bunch of asterisks when he wrote it. I love it. You're a Marc asterisk Raimondi until otherwise said. That's so. Fine. I forgot that derailed me. Oh, Anthony Pettis, man, comes out there. He's the biggest underdog on the whole damn card. He's getting his butt kicked for basically 9 minutes. He's chopping up those legs of Stephen Thompson though, and then bam, man, he hits that Superman punch, kind of like off the cage. Not really. People seem to get upset when you say it was off the cage. He at least uses some momentum from the cage to get off a Superman punch, hook, some kind of something. And good Lord, Stephen Thompson, who has gone 10 rounds with Tyron Woodley, just got floored by Anthony Pettis, the former lightweight champion. How crazy was that?
Man, I was off Saturday night, as you know, maybe everyone else doesn't know. And my girlfriend had a sumo competition. She's not 300 pounds, and nor a Japanese man.
I was about to say you should throw a caveat in there.
Yeah, I just want to throw that out there. But we were down in Long Beach, California, and of course I'm still watching on my phone because I just can't stay away as hard as I try. And I'm watching the main event on my phone on ESPN Plus, and we're in like a taco joint in Long Beach or Carson, and just watching Pettis kind of get tuned up, right? I mean, he was getting pieced up. He was getting many punches to the face, and he was a mess. And then when he landed that Superman punch, rebounding off the cage, I lost my mind in the restaurant. Like I got up out of my chair. I was like, what? I was like, what? That was so freaking amazing. I literally got up out of my chair and that was incredible. And people are saying it's a fluke and it was a lucky punch. Like, this is a dude that kicked a man in the 5th round of a title fight, propelling himself off the cage. There is no such thing as a fluke with Anthony Pettis. This is just what he does. This is Showtime, baby. This is what the man does.
Yeah, man, it really does feel like Showtime is back. And I think we've been waiting to say that for a while. Hey, maybe this was a lucky punch, but this was a big one, man. This was a big one at a crossroads for Anthony Pettis in his career, because he had tried that lightweight, was going nowhere. He tried featherweight. That ended up being disastrous for him. That pretty much ruined his body, and he's still feeling effects from it. Goes back up to lightweight, and he's still struggling. He is obviously – the one caveat you have to always throw in there with Anthony Pettis is that he is only fighting basically the very absolute best of the best of the best in the division.
Every time.
You look at his record, and there's a lot of losses on there, but they are all current or former champions, basically. Tony Ferguson types. And so, hey, yeah, he was struggling at lightweight again. This welterweight move really seemed like a Hail Mary type of situation to sort of find himself in title contention one last time in his career. And good Lord, did it work, man? My question to you, though, is he was obviously smaller in there, right? He was smaller in there against Stephen Thompson. You could tell just by looking that he was not a natural welterweight. But is there something to this now? Because we have seen over and over and over again, and me and you have just talked about it and amplified it too. Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, they're middling middleweights, go up to light heavyweight, instantly they're in title contention. Robert Whittaker, he's a middling welterweight, goes up to middleweight, he is now the champion. Jorge Masvidal, and now Anthony Pettis, lightweights who were kind of struggling to make it in that division, and now they go up to welterweight and within a span of 2 weeks of each other, scored monstrous knockouts over two of the best guys in that division. Is this sustainable for Anthony Pettis? Because it seems like it has been for other guys.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I spoke to Pettis last week before the fight, and he was very clear when he said that him going up to welterweight, I mean, it's possible he could stay around, but the opponent was a big factor in his moving up for this fight. And what I mean by that is Stephen Thompson is not a gigantic wrestler who's going to try to grind out a decision against Anthony Pettis. He's a guy that's going to stand and strike, and Anthony Pettis is pretty much comfortable doing that, as we know, against anyone in the world at really any weight class. So that was a big part of the reason why he moved up. And if you look at the rest of that division at the top, especially with the Usmans and the Covingtons and the
nightmare wrestlers.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a division that is just stacked at the top with fantastic wrestlers. So I don't know what Pettis' future is at welterweight. I could see. I think that his future is probably still at lightweight. Maybe, but I think he's gonna just go by the matchup. I think that's kind of the point in his career that he's at. I would not hate Pettis versus the winner of Dos Anjos and Kevin Lee. That would be intriguing to me at 170 because they're all reformed lightweights. Essentially, they've all moved up to 170, and stylistically, those are tough matchups for Pettis, but. Dos Anjos, I would not mind seeing that rematch from that lightweight title fight back in the day in Dallas, and Pettis versus Lee would be fun. I think that could be interesting, but I think there are matchups that probably fit his style a little bit better at lightweight. I mean,
sure, I agree.
Pettis versus Cowboy too. You know, if the winner of Iaquinta Cowboy would be interesting. I mean, there's other stuff out there for him. I mean, he's in a good spot, but I think he has to be a little bit selective, especially at welterweight, given the size and the wrestling ability of those guys.
I agree with you, and to a certain extent. I mean, the welterweight division is not the place you want to be if you struggle with wrestlers, especially big bulky wrestlers, because you got over and over guys that they could just throw at you at the top of that division that you probably could give Anthony Pettis struggles in that regard. That said, though, I kind of want to see him do the Kelvin Gastelum, right? Like Kelvin went to 185 as sort of a test subject, and it ended up working out for him. He was just like, okay, I'm going to see how far I can take this. And he's taken it really damn far so far. So I almost wouldn't mind seeing Anthony just say, you know, hey, I feel really great at this weight class. I'm not sucking in my body to make this. I feel really hydrated and full. Let's see how far I can take this. That would be interesting to me. That being said, the moment that man at the end of his fight called out the winner of Justin Gaethje versus Edson Barboza, that's all my mind can think of now, because him versus the winner of one of those guys, that's a sensational fight that I would love to see. So either way this shakes out, Anthony Pettis, like you said, is an incredibly good spot and a much, much better spot than he was a week ago. This time that last week, I don't know that we're having even close to the same type of conversation about Anthony Pettis that we are now. And then especially a finish like this, man. A finish like this perpetuates the Showtime legacy in a way that Anthony really hasn't been able to do in a bit. He was called Showtime for a reason back in the day. You look up his WEC highlights, they're amazing, man. They are amazing. They are like MVP-esque. And now he's doing it again, and on a spot like this, that's a really big win for him. Last question before we move on. Stephen Thompson now, man. I mean, he was in a spot where he might have been the next title contender if he had won this fight, or he might have been at least just one fight away. He was sort of always in this zone, this Joseph Benavidez zone where he had lost twice to Tyron Woodley, so he was never going to get another shot there. But he was clearly one of the best guys in this division. Sure. This is a big one, man. This hurts for him and his title chances to lose this one. What do you want? What do you see? What if you're Stephen Thompson? What do you do next? Do you try out middleweight maybe, or do you just keep things going at welterweight and try to get back in it?
I think you probably just keep it going at welterweight. I mean, Wonder Boy beat Jorge Masvidal, and we're talking about Jorge Masvidal now as a possible top contender with one more win. So it's not, and especially now that Woodley is no longer the champion, Thompson's path back to the title is a little bit more straightforward than it would have been otherwise. So I think that he just sticks around and maybe fights like Santiago Ponzinibbio, someone like that. I mean, maybe he fights.
I like that fight, actually. I like that fight. I just spoke to Santiago last week when I was at ATT, and he is extremely frustrated that he can't get a fight against someone ranked.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, even a Leon Edwards, someone like that would be interesting.
Yeah, and that gives both those guys a chance to move up in the division. Good matchmaking, Mark. I like that.
I do. Not too bad for 2:45 a.m.
That's not at all what you do. In fact, you generally do the opposite. So I'll give you that one, though.
All right, whatever. Let's move on.
All right, next one's coming up, and it's talking about someone that you are very high on, Mark. This one's coming from our good friend Lucian. He wants to know about Maisie Barber and being a developmental talent in the UFC. Warmest of greetings on this beautiful day. I love you, Lucian. You're always so poetic with your intros. While I was really impressed with Barber's performance against JJ Aldridge, this past weekend, especially the adjustments she made in the second round that led to the TKO victory, I also thought that the first round showed a lot of her vulnerabilities and made it clear that she does need that correct environment to develop into a top-level talent that she seems to have the potential of being. However, I am not quite certain if the UFC is the correct environment for this, especially since their strawweight division, she's a flyweight now, but I understand what you mean, is absolutely loaded with tough fighters, and I keep mentally comparing her to someone like Van Zandt. So I was curious that do you think that the UFC, I was curious if you think that the UFC is a suitable place for someone as young and rough as Barber to develop, or do you feel that Barber would have been better suited to work through her issues in a smaller promotion like Invicta first? So Mark, you've been very high on Maisie Barber since she really came into this company. You've spoken to her several times in various interviews. What was your takeaway from her big debut at flyweight? She scores that second round TKO, battles back from adversity. But also B, do you think that she is doing herself a disservice by throwing herself into the deep end this quickly? As it seems as though she wants to do, she is very public with her goals of being the youngest UFC champion ever.
I could see it both ways. I think, first of all, as far as the performance goes, I think it showed that she does have things to work on. She's not going to come right out and challenge Valentina Shevchenko or Rose Namajunas tomorrow. I think everyone kind of knew that already, but Aldrich is a pretty good prospect in her own right, and she gave Barber a run in that first round. She looked good. She dropped her. I think it was a good sign that Barber was able to come back from adversity and show that she has that in her, that she's not just a front runner. Because sometimes, you give a young fighter a run and they don't come back from that. They don't battle back from adversity, and she did. So that I think was ultimately a net win for her, that result. She's 20 years old. I mean, bottom line, she is 20 years old. That is ridiculous. What the hell? What were you doing when you were 20, Shaun Al-Shatti? This is a very impressive young woman, and I think I don't think it's fair to compare her to someone like Paige Van Zandt, because Maisie Barber has been training in martial arts since she was like 3 years old. I mean, she's kind of been groomed for this. She's kind of that next generation of women's fighters who have been doing MMA for a very, very long time already. I mean, she grew up watching like Ronda Rousey. She's 20. I mean, she's young. So
Jesus, when you say someone grew up watching Ronda Rousey, that makes me feel extremely old.
Yeah, I mean, but think about it. I mean, she made the decision to put all of her eggs into the MMA basket when she was 14.
Sure.
And that was only 6 years ago. So think about, what was going on 6 years ago. That was literally Ronda Rousey's UFC debut in 2013. So that was that time period, which is crazy, but that's where we're at. And I mean, you can make the case that maybe she should have stuck in LFA for a little bit longer or gone to Invicta and gotten seasoning that way. But look, I mean, she can beat UFC caliber opponents, UFC opponents, she's doing that. She's 2-0, and she's making much more money in the UFC than she probably would be in LFA and Invicta. No disrespect to them. So I think as long as she continues on this trajectory, literally has a countdown on her phone to the day in which she'll turn the same age that John Jones was when he became the youngest champion in UFC history. So she is no joke. Like, she is really driven, and this is what she wants to do. And I would say continue to let her do it. I don't throw her into a top 5 fight right now, but a slow build. She has almost 3 years to even get there. I mean, she could do it in 3 years. Who knows what Maisie Barber will be? I think she'll be very, very, very good. So I'm excited about her trajectory overall.
Yeah, I think you said something in particular there that's the key point to me and the most telling point to me is she's already here and she's already beating UFC talent, UFC quality talent. Like, JJ Aldridge is a very legitimate fighter. She is a very interesting prospect in and of her own right, or in her own right. I'm sorry. And even Maisie Barber's first fight was against Hannah Cifers, and she stopped Hannah Cifers, who, I will remind you, just fought a woman with a broken arm and then refused to go to the hospital with a broken arm because she is a very, very tough individual. So although the wins that Maisie Barber already has gotten in the UFC have not been, cupcakes. They have not been cakewalks. So it is very impressive what she is doing so far. Also, I will say it's very impressive to just see how poised she is, right? Like how put together she is just mentally in terms of she has very clear goals. She is very driven and focused on those goals, and she's able to articulate those goals extremely well for someone so incredibly young. Because as you said, what were you doing when you were 20? I was not doing anything close to that impressive when I was 20 years old.
Certainly not. The opposite for me.
So I agree with you. I think the UFC needs to take caution to not rush her into things. I know the flyweight division is very young. It is very new. It is very unsettled. There's still very much up in the air. No, things are still getting figured out. The rankings really don't mean much there at this point. So I don't want them to rush her into something crazy too soon because, like you said, she has a couple years even on her own countdown. But I think if you give her a year or two more of seasoning, you're looking at a very legitimate fighter at 125 pounds. The way she was getting to 115 seemed very dangerous and very not beneficial towards her performance. And she seemed like a brand new fighter, as she said, at 125 with legitimate power. She seemed as though she had legitimate stopping power at 125, and that's not something we see a lot. So that alone is very intriguing.
Yeah, and I still think that she can make 115. She was just doing it so barbarically, eating 500 calories a day to get down. I mean, that's heinous for someone's body to do that. Heinous. So I think that if she gets on the UFC PI's plan, which it seems like she's doing now, she can probably get to 115. I mean, she's not a super big 115er if she does it the correct way. So I can see her also being successful in that division as well.
Yeah. Well, hey man, what's next?
All right. What do we have here? What do we have? This is from Ted Bear. Should more fighters move between 2 weight classes? For fighters who have no clear path to winning the title, like Pettis, most of us can agree Usman and Khabib are bad matchups for him. Should they take, quote, smart, fun matchups more often in another weight class? Who would you like to see as a just visiting fighter in another weight class? Here's a few. Gustafsson versus Stipe at heavyweight. Woodley versus Weidman at middleweight. Edgar versus anyone at bantamweight. And just for the hell of it, Lineker versus Stevens at featherweight. You think, Shaun? I'll say one thing about this off the bat. I think fighters do want to do that. It's the UFC that does not want that. That was one of Rory McDonald's big things about going to Bellator, is that he wanted to kind of moonlight in other divisions, and the UFC was not interested in doing that. They like their fighters to stick to one division.
I will say I think it's twofold though, because I agree with you in that. I think some fighters do want to do that, especially now where it seems like this is becoming more and more of a feasible and actually sometimes beneficial situation to try those experiments. Because I feel like if you move up and you fail, people don't really hold it against you nearly as hard as if you did it at your own weight class, right? Like, you're trying something new, people understand that. That being said, I think I've spoken to a lot of fighters as well, and you probably have as well, where they have put in so much time and energy to work up to whatever rankings that they are, whether it's lightweight, the division's so deep, they've put in so much time to finally get into those rankings, or welterweight, or etc., that the idea of going to a different division to just do a fun fight seems appealing. They feel as though they would be basically having to start over and having wasted all that time invested in that their own division. So I think it's probably twofold. I think that there's reticence on both sides when it comes to that. That being said, I'm all for it, man. I like these type of fights as long as it doesn't clog up a championship picture and it's more of just for the fun spectacle of it. Like Anthony Pettis, Stephen Thompson, neither of these guys were the top contender or the champion. So you're not slowing anything down. I'm a big fan of it. I think it gives people, guys and women, a chance to test out different divisions and see whether maybe, hey, this might be more of an advantageous and correct division for me, especially with a big fight like that. Also, I'm just up for fun. If especially in places where these titles are so bogged down and divisions are so log jammed, like lightweight and welterweight, where no matter what you're doing, you're not going to make any progress really until the end of the year at best. Why not, man? Why not just put yourself out there and get headlines for something else? Get headlines for something fun and interesting, and give us something interesting to watch. Like, it seems like it's beneficial to everybody. I dig it.
I agree. I'm with you on that one. I wish the UFC would do that more, but they don't seem like they really are interested in that. They like to keep it linear.
It seems like they're willing to do it for guys who have put in the sweat equity for it. Like
in some cases, I mean, but then again, Jose Aldo was trying to get fights at 155 for so long against like Pettis when he was the champion. Things have changed dramatically since then with all these super fights and these champion versus champion matchups. And maybe the UFC is loosening the reins a little bit in that regard. But and maybe the Pettis situation is one that could open that up. But I would like to see more of it. But I feel like they like to keep guys and girls and women in one weight class and kind of build up their resumes that way. It's a lot easier for the matchmakers if they have that list of what weight, who's in what weight class, their rankings, and who fights who.
I'm just saying, man, Tyron Woodley versus Chris Weidman at middleweight, as this gentleman suggested, would watch.
That was, yeah, I mean, Woodley would be giving up a lot of size in terms of height, especially. Weidman is giant. It's a giant man. But I mean, I wouldn't turn it off my TV, put it that way.
I mean, I'm just saying Anthony Pettis and Jorge Masvidal and Robert Whittaker and all these guys are proving that size does not mean as much as we thought it once did.
Yes, I agree. No, 100%. So I have a quick favor to ask of you. I'm in a little bit of a bind.
Oh no, what's up?
So it turns out that I don't have the right converter to charge my laptop in this hotel room. So here's what I'm gonna do. You're giving me a look of trepidation. So I'm going to read the next question, and I will ask you to answer it. And then while you're doing that, I'm going to call the front desk to see if they have an adapter available. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay. Because I'm on 38%, and I'm not sure how much longer this baby's gonna keep up.
38% isn't enough to hold you for another 30 minutes?
Oh, it just went from 60 to 38 in about 2 minutes. So. We're draining battery, baby.
All right, man. Be quick. Be quick.
All right. Ready? Here, I'm gonna read it to you. Talk a lot. Okay. From Lodovic, our pal. Flyweights. Hi there. Hi, Lodovic. Long story short, is the division dead or what? At this point, it seems like a lock. They will either make Cejudo the bantamweight champ or let him take a loss. Either of those seem like a nail in the coffin of that division. But if that's the case, why are they still booking fights at flyweight? Was I the only one absolutely not interested in that flyweight bout on Saturday because of the situation? Are they about to milk that division one last time by getting a champ-champ matchup out of it before they kiss it goodbye? Or do you see any scenario in which they keep the division alive past the Cejudo-Moraes title fight?
All right, I will do my best to answer a long Marc Raimondi-esque answer for this. You hurry up now, sir. So this is an interesting situation and also a frustrating situation for, I think, everyone involved, because I agree with the general premise that Lodovic asked us. Were you the only one? Was I the only one absolutely not interested in that flyweight fight on Saturday because of the situation? Jussier Formiga scored a giant win for himself. And this is a man who has been on the precipice of flyweight title contention for years at this point. He has always been one step away. And I have to agree, man, there was a certain extent to which I did not care about this fight as much as I should and wanted to, because we have sort of been left in a lurch with this. We don't understand at all what the future of flyweight is. It seems as though any flyweight that loses or loses even just one fight really is getting cut. And so where are we actually at with flyweight? Just this past week, we had a young man debut in the flyweight division. His name is escaping me now. I will get it in a second. And he had just made his UFC debut, and he's making his UFC debut as the number 14 flyweight in the world, because there's literally that many fighters in the entire division. That's sort of where that is the ultimate referendum on where we are at flyweight. And I know it is frustrating for everyone involved. I was at ATT this past week in Florida, like I had said, and I spoke to Pedro Munoz while I was there. And he is, of course, one of the top bantamweight contenders. He was sort of in contention with Aljamain Sterling and also Marlon Moraes and Henry Cejudo to be in this bantamweight title fight. And even he expressed displeasure with how the flyweight division is being handled and just this whole situation. And it really is somewhat of a mess. That being said, I think of all of the situations you could put out there for a champion to move up and fight another champion, another situation like this Cejudo, now challenging for Marlon Moraes for this bantamweight title, this one makes the most sense of all of them to me. Henry Cejudo is probably the most worthy person to be able to do this divisional jump and sort of make it like that. That being said, I don't know that I like this. I wish that there was more transparency about this, because it feels as though for flyweights, for bantamweights, for the media, for fans, this is all too confusing to actually follow and understand. It is actually hurting the actual stakes of the fight itself.
I'm back.
Any luck?
No. Nope.
All right, we're just gonna go and we're gonna figure it out.
We're gonna ride it until the wheels fall off. So, flyweight division. I think I didn't hear anything that you said, so I don't want to step on anything you said. But basically, the division is dead. They're just they're cutting everyone who loses. They're cutting everyone who loses. It's pretty much a dead division.
So that's what I was more or less talking about. Is they're cutting everyone who's losing, but they're still staging fights, right? And you have Dana White out here on Saturday.
Yeah, well, we have people on contract that need to get fights.
But you have Dana White on Saturday here basically saying, I didn't have a plan, but now I have a plan, and here's my plan. I'm going to do Henry Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes, and then I'm going to do Jussier Formiga versus Joseph Benavidez.
As if Joseph Benavidez has not done enough to earn a damn title shot. Christ.
So not only that, but he says
he beat Henry Cejudo. He beat him.
So not only that, but he says he's going to do that fight for the number one contender. And then if someone gets injured, they can step up. So wait, is that the number one? That
makes absolutely no sense.
So yeah, is that the number one contender of bantamweight now? Like, what does this mean? Is this the number one contender for flyweight, and then the flyweight contender can maybe move up if there's an injury? Like, what? None of this makes any sense. And it goes back to the base point that I was saying, which, yeah, it does hurt the actual stakes of the fight themselves, because you're watching Jussier Formiga score a giant win in a very consequential fight on Saturday, and it doesn't feel like it means anything. It feels like the whole narrative surrounding this division is taking away from a fight that should have been very important.
Okay, sorry. Let's move on, shall we? Because we're playing with this laptop's power. We're up against it.
All right, let's do it.
It could die at any moment.
We'll figure it out. Next one's coming up is from SJY on the MMA fighting page. You got me all flustered, Mark. ESPN.
My apologies.
ESPN.com is only covering UFC and PFL. How can Bellator attract casual fans in the US now that they are mainly on DAZN? And so that's his question. And I'll also add to that question, DAZN is also raising their prices now.
That's right.
Because DAZN has spent a lot of money on a lot of boxers. A lot of money on a lot of boxers. And I'm sure they need to raise their prices now to make some money, make some of that back. So now that you have ESPN set up sort of as this one-stop shop for MMA, whether it's the UFC pay-per-views, or PFL, you have Bellator out here all alone on DAZN now, who's going to raise their prices. Is this potentially a bad sign for Bellator?
I mean, yes and no. I don't think. I don't think ESPN.com is ceasing coverage of Bellator. I still think they're covering Bellator. Are they covering it? They're going to cover it super hard and full scale coverage? Probably not. But they never really did. They never really did do that anyway. So that's not a huge change, I don't think. Bellator is an interesting spot because the DAZN deal was great for them because they got that money. They got paid for the rights to those shows, which for Bellator, that's what you want. You want to start selling the rights to your stuff to make money, and rather than just being on the network that owns you, or a network that is owned by your parent company. So it was a win for Bellator, but then it goes into that situation where you have to think about, is being behind that DAZN paywall, especially now that it's going up in price, does that lead to growth of the promotion? And I would say probably not. But ultimately, what they need to do is good.
I would add to that not only are they behind a paywall, but now their biggest competitors and basically the biggest people in the space have gone behind multiple paywalls now, to
That's
where
right.
and they're direct competitors in terms of paywalls, where if you want all of the best content in the sport, you're already signing up for these various things now because you have to. And so Bellator and DAZN by proxy becomes even less of a top priority if you're a fan who only has a certain budget to allocate out for this monthly.
I totally agree, and it is going to be a question moving forward with these streaming services. How viable are they? I mean, the question for the entire sport is that very question. Okay, great. In the short term, makes a good amount of money for the promotion. Same thing with the UFC and this ESPN Plus deal. But in the long run, does it grow the sport? Is putting the sport behind a paywall leading to growth? And that was the criticism of boxing for a long time, is that they're just doing too many pay-per-views. I mean, this is a little bit different because it's cheaper than a pay-per-view was and is, but that was always the criticism of boxing, along with other criticisms, is that if you just have everything on pay-per-view, you're limiting yourself to possible viewers. And boxing has only made its comeback now. It's rallied in recent years because things have been on TV. PBC has been on TV. It's been on Fox. It's been on NBC. It's been on FS1. It's been on Spike TV. And obviously Showtime and HBO show a lot more stuff than they used to. It used to be mostly pay-per-view. So it is a question that a lot of things are going to have to, I mean, it's a big question for the entire entertainment world, honestly, because everything is going digital. Everything's going streaming.
Yeah. Hey, let's keep it moving. Let's try to get as many in here as we can before you're out. Next one's coming from M Haydock 06, and it's the reason why you're in Tokyo, my friend. One championship. Right. He writes, Shaun and Marc, I have never watched a one championship card, mainly due to its lack of TV coverage in the UK, and I assume I am not alone in making this weekend's card my first. Are there any fighters to keep an eye on who could be competitive in the UFC other than the obvious Alvarez and DJ? Ong Nilasong, I never know how to say that, but I hope I'm saying that right, is one of interest who holds the light heavyweight and middleweight titles and seems to train with Henry Hooft. How highly do you rate him? Also, what's the deal with the one championship weight classes? Thanks. So before I even throw this to you, I'll answer the second part of that question. The one championship weight classes, for anybody who is just tuning in this week for the first time, it's effectively set up so that if you're fighting at lightweight, you're actually, everything's moved up a weight class, basically. Right. So if you're fighting at lightweight, you're fighting at 170. If you're fighting at featherweight, you're fighting at 155. It's to supposedly mitigate weight cutting to some degree. Although I will say that the weigh-ins for one championship are relatively strange, and they're not public, and it seems
I still don't.
They're not public, and it seems to be a little shady. I'm not gonna lie. It seems like there would be room for trickery if you needed to and manipulation, but that is neither here nor there.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask some questions about the weight regulations this week, and I'm very
hammer him, Marc Raimondi. You got
well,
it.
I'm just real curious to see, how what Alvarez and Johnson and some of the others think about the procedure compared to what we do in the States. Because people who have said, people who have criticized the way of weight cutting, they say that one championship is, everyone should go on that model. You know what they do. Well, I want to find out what the hell do they do, because I'm not 100% sure. I've heard, but I don't really know. I haven't really heard from a lot of fighters. To answer the question, I think there are a few fighters who I think would be very competitive in the UFC. Ong La Ansang would be one of them. Martin Nguyen, I think, would be very good. He's a featherweight champion, so he's the 155 champion, former two-weight champion. Adriano Moraes is pretty darn good. He's the one flyweight champion, and I mean, possibly best of all, Angela Lee. I mean, I think I don't know if I want to say best of all, but I think as far as competitiveness in her division, she is the atomweight champion, and she's moving up to strawweight, so that's 125, and it's a little bit confusing for this weekend, and she's challenging for that belt, so she's trying to become a two-weight champion this weekend, and so she's the 115 champion right now. She's very, very good and still very young. She's one of the big stars in one, and really one of the best young stars in the entire sport. She's 22.
Yeah. Well, my last question to you about this topic, just as before we move on, you're there. You obviously have done a lot of research. You're prepared yourself for a week in Japan covering this event. Do you feel as though we are about to see DJ and Eddie Alvarez run roughshod over this organization, or is there challenges there for them, or are there opportunities where maybe guys could get a win over some legends like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are favorites. I think that's obvious. On paper, they are favorites to win their respective Grand Prix, which start on Sunday in Japan, overnight Saturday into Sunday in North America. But I think they can be given a run. I do. I look, if you look at the flyweight Grand Prix draw, it's pretty easy to say that, hey, Demetrius Johnson's probably gonna run through this draw, but I don't know that to be the case. Plus, there's some rules alterations here for one championship. You don't know for sure. And in Eddie Alvarez's bracket, including the guy that he's fighting this weekend, Timofey Nastayukin, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, there's some tough outs. Probably a tougher draw than Demetrius has. And Timofey is dude can throw down. He's been in some fight of the year candidates for one, so that should be a freaking awesome fight. And it's not going to be easy for Alvarez. It's not going to be easy for either one of them. I don't think. I think it's going to be harder than people think.
It'll be interesting to me, to see just how they adapt and how they handle the week, and what I guess the differences, how they enjoy the differences. But also, we've seen this with other fighters who leave the UFC on top, right? People who leave the UFC either as a top contender or someone who was a former champion. Oftentimes they go to these other promotions and they sort of take it lightly, maybe to some extent, and they sort of think it's going to be an easier transition than it is, and they suffer a bad loss in their first time out. So it will be interesting to me to see what Eddie Alvarez and DJ look like in this new arena. I know for a fact that Eddie in particular, but also DJ, probably will love the spectacle of it, because for anybody who hasn't watched a one championship event, they very much do the type of, they go all out with the spectacle, similar to a way that a Pride did or something like that. Not to the extent that Ryzen does, but still you have many of the same elements in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it's cool for Alvarez to kind of coming full circle, because he had so many great fights in Japan, and he loves the Japanese fans, and I think they love him too, and I think it should be a nice little not quite a homecoming, but certainly kind of a blast from the past for him this week. Yeah.
Let's keep it moving, man, and let's talk about this weekend, because I am beyond excited for this weekend. And the intro to this question from Wee Tuxie, okay, really sums up my feelings. Barboza versus Gaethje. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I know. I think we all know what we are wanting to see from Gaethje and Barboza, he writes. These have been two of the most exciting fighters in the sport. Barboza has the fastest kicks in the game. Gaethje has unrelenting pressure and definitely takes a few shots. At the risk of jinxing it, how can this not be awesome? Who have you got, why, and where does the winner go from here? Love listening every week, gentlemen. Keep up the amazing work. Keep smiling, Shaun. Keep doing you, Marc. And he spelled your name wrong. That was great. That was a great way to exit that question. That last line was amazing. So Marc Raimondi, lightweight division. We always talk about how great this lightweight division is. Good Lord, I am so stupidly excited for Edson Barboza versus Justin Gaethje. I am all in anytime either of those guys fight. Now that they're fighting each other, I spoke to Edson this past week, and I basically said to him, because Justin has been out here saying, he wants to finish Edson with leg kicks. I basically said to Edson, what do you think about that? Has anybody ever told you that in your entire life, that they want to get in a leg kicking battle with you? And he kind of giggled and chuckled a bit and said, I've been doing Muay Thai my entire life. No one's ever said that to me. A lot of people have tried and no one has been able to do it. A lot of people have failed. So if he wants to do it, I'm right here for 25 minutes of pain. Let's do it. And I got chills when he said that to me. I am so on board with this fight. I cannot wait for it. Edson Barboza, Justin Gaethje, man. Thoughts?
Oh God, so good. So the beauty of this, I'll be in Tokyo for one, but I'll be able to watch this like entire card like in the morning and afternoon Sunday here, and then go over to Sumo Hall to watch one. So I'm pretty excited about that. There's gonna be a lot of violence on a Sunday afternoon in on a spring day in Tokyo. Cannot wait. Barboza Gaethje is just so freaking good, man. I want to see that leg kick battle. Let's just get nasty. Let's just get dirty. I have no idea who's gonna win. But I'd be very surprised, and I know I've said this before, and it's cost me greatly. But I would be very, very surprised if this is not a violent finish of some kind. I'm not gonna bet you, but I'd be very surprised if it wasn't some kind of violent, amazing, just delicious, beautiful, fantastic viciousness.
If I said to you, and this is the last time I'm going to use this analogy on the show because I've already done it once, but if I put a gun to your head and I said, tell me right now, is this going to be in the top 3 for fight of the year by the end of 2019? Are you willing to bet against that?
It seems almost absurd talking fight of the year before the fight even happens, but how can you deny these guys? I mean, there are perennial names on that list. Justin Gaethje wins fight of the year every year, pretty much.
He's won it back-to-back years for us.
Yeah. He wins it every year. He's taken the crown from Robbie Lawler as the most violent. So yeah, I mean, you could probably pencil that in on the top 5 right now today on Wednesday.
And Edson Barboza, man, he is no stranger to wars. I mean, just look at his last fight against Dan Hooker. That was a grueling fight. You go back, one of my favorite fights ever, like low-key kind of underrated fights, is Edson Barboza versus Tony Ferguson. Man.
Oh God, I was just thinking that was amazing.
Yeah,
I get chills like thinking about it.
Neither of these guys spare their feelings when it comes to their willingness to lay it all out there in the cage, and I think we could see something special on Saturday. I would be stunned if it's not a incredible fight to some degree. Yeah. That being said, we got to make the picks. Someone asked us for a pick, so who's your pick, Marc Raimondi?
I'm going to go.
I'm gonna caveat this with you're on a really bad streak. You've lost a bunch in a row.
I mean, that's not a surprise. I'm gonna go Edson Barboza. I'm gonna go Barboza in this one. Believe it or not.
Okay.
By decision.
Wow. You think this goes 5 rounds?
No, I'm just joking.
These men are going to take 40 years off their lives if they go 5 rounds with each other.
I almost don't want that, like, just for their safety.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I think Barboza, but Gaethje is just the ultimate wild card. So
I'm going with Justin Gaethje on this. I just have a feeling. I think his pressure game, and giving Edson a little bit of his own medicine, maybe just, I don't know. I don't know that Edson's fought a fighter like that, and it should be interesting.
Yeah,
but I cannot wait.
Same.
So, Marc, it is approaching an hour and a half mark in the show. We have a bunch of Twitter questions, and your computer is dying, and we still need to get to the promo. Do you want to keep going with green, or do you want to hit some Twitter? Do you want to go to the promo? How do you want to get to this?
Let's just go real quick. These last few questions from Alpha Beta. Fantasy matchup: Anthony Johnson versus Francis Ngannou at heavyweight. I'd rather see Rumble versus Francis Ngannou than him versus Jones or DC. What do you think?
Oh, Jesus. I mean, I always will always want to see Anthony Johnson versus John Jones, but you give me Anthony Johnson versus Francis Ngannou, I will not complain.
No, I would plunk down. That could be a pay-per-view main event, and I would pay for that right now. So yes, of course.
That pay-per-view main event would last 40 seconds, but I am all in.
I don't care. I would, and it would be the greatest 40 seconds of my life.
Especially Anthony Johnson at heavyweight now. If you look at that guy now and you see recent pictures of him, he is obscenely large.
He is a unit. Moving on, JSTOR. Should Wonder Boy consider a move to 1? Obviously, Thompson can compete at a very high level in the UFC and no idea where his contract stands. However, this seems like could be very attractive to 1, and apparently there are boatloads of money to be made there. With the championship fight likely being at least several fights away, would it be a wise move for him to consider this? I would say no. I still think there's a path. We talked about this. There's a path for him back to the title, especially now that Woodley is no longer the champion.
I agree with you in that regard, although I would say that Stephen Thompson kind of fits the 1 championship mold right now, right? I mean, he's the respectful guy who's all about the art of it, yeah. The actual art in the mixed martial arts. I don't know that you could have handled a loss that bad, or like a bad loss that well as Stephen Thompson handled it on Saturday. I mean, he is just a class act through and through. The way he handled getting knocked out for the first time ever in his fighting career. He was joking about it with Anthony Pettis inside the cage, just saying, "Oh shucks, dang!" Like he's taking Instagram live videos of himself from the hospital. Like he is a absolute class act. We are lucky to have him in this sport. 1 championship, that would be interesting, but yeah, I think there's still a path there for him to work his way to that title, especially with Usman now being the champion.
Bellator as a B+ player. This is from after the fights. Do you have Bellator beating the UFC in 3 of these matchups? And he lists a few matchups here with champions in the UFC and Bellator. Should these pairings shift the narrative on Bellator? They have several fighters who are #1 pound for pound in their division, which doesn't really make sense because pound for pound means it transcends the division. Anyway, Ryan Bader versus Daniel Cormier at heavyweight. I mean, obviously, I think Cormier would win that.
Same.
Although Bader is very good, of course. Gegard Mousasi versus Whitaker or Adesanya or Gastelum with middleweight. I mean, I put Mousasi right up there with those guys. I don't know about you.
I might favor Mousasi to win all of those fights.
He may be the favorite in any of those fights. Welterweight, Rory McDonald or Kamaru Usman.
That's a pick 'em to me. I mean, that's an interesting one. I don't know where Rory McDonald is at this point in his career. He's taken a lot of damage, but that to me, if you're getting the best Rory McDonald, that's a pick 'em.
Yeah. Michael Chandler versus Khabib Nurmagomedov at lightweight. I would still pick Khabib. I think Chandler is phenomenal though and really underrated. But I would still pick Khabib in that fight.
Same.
Darren Caldwell versus post USADA TJ Dillashaw at bantamweight. I mean, I don't know anything about quote unquote post USADA TJ Dillashaw. We don't even know what he popped for, so it's almost impossible to give an answer to this. But I will say that Edson Fights does have a good point. Bellator does have more they have elite fighters in different weight classes now.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't know that that's anything different than what we've always said, though, right? Yeah. Because like Darren Caldwell, like I would not.
It's not different than what we've said, Shaun, but I think there is a stigma against Bellator among some fans.
I would say that I would not pick Darren Caldwell against Dillashaw, Moraes, or Henry Cejudo, or any of these guys at the top of the bantamweight division. But that being said, I mean, the two that we just pointed out were Mousasi and McDonald, and we've talked for a while. I think the MMA community as a whole has talked for a while about how those might be the best guys in Bellator and those might be the best guys in their weight classes. Yeah. So it definitely the narrative with Bellator, I think, has already shifted. Now the interesting thing to see in 2019 will that shift continue or will it sort of stagnate out? And that's kind of there. We're looking at the same roster at the end of the year. Like if they're able to add a couple another nice pieces to this, you're looking at something really interesting at the end of the year.
100%, especially if those younger guys develop into stars. Want to hit a couple quick Twitter questions, then go to the promo. I'm on 18%.
All right, let's do 1 or 2 Twitter questions, then we'll do that.
So can you grab those? Because I took off TweetDeck because I didn't want to take power away.
Sure. I got you. Real quick, Nico from Twitter tells Marc Raimondi to call his mother, and he's right. Call your mother, Marc Raimondi.
All right, Nico.
You're a terrible, terrible son, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Let's see.
I just want to break in real quick, Shaun. This is an interesting little tidbit. John Jones just tweeted. and I saw some.
Oh, I just saw this.
Saw some rumors and reports about him maybe tied to a fight with Stipe Miocic this summer. And John Jones tweets, "I don't think you guys are ready to witness at Stipe Miocic and I. Would July give you all enough time?" Interesting. Very interesting.
If you're setting up John Jones versus Stipe Miocic at heavyweight, I am all the way in on that.
Yes, and could that be the co-main event of DC versus Brock Lesnar? It could almost be like a heavyweight winner-take-all type situation where the winner of Jones Miocic faces the winner of DC Brock. That would be one massive, in many ways, international fight week.
Can you imagine a press conference where John Jones is the co-main event to DC being in the main event? How much he would let him hear about that?
He would have to be, though, right? I mean, it wouldn't be for a title. And
oh,
DC
no.
is the heavyweight champion.
John would definitely be the co-main event, and the dynamic between that the entire week would probably be very distracting for Daniel Cormier.
Yeah. Also, I don't think Jones would care that much because if it's Brock as the headliner, Jones is getting give me all those pay-per-view buys, gets all those pay-per-view points.
Absolutely. So. Okay, I got a good question here from Michael Scarfo, who wants to know, if you were in a lab and were trying to create the ultimate fighter, which 3 fighters would you mix together to create the ultimate hybrid? He says he'd blend McGregor striking with Khabib's wrestling and Diego Sanchez's craziness. So that's an interesting setup. Do you have an answer for this, or you want me to go?
I would say Khabib Nurmagomedov's wrestling, prime Anderson Silva's striking, and his timing, and probably the grappling of Damian Maia.
Okay, so you're leaving a lot on the table there. I'm going to pick up the pieces that you're leaving.
Sure.
I would say that I would take Khabib Nurmagomedov's wrestling as well, which says a lot about Khabib that all 3 of us have picked him for that aspect. But I think that's pretty indisputable. I would take Demetrius Johnson's speed, because especially at the heavier weight classes, I think that's translating pretty incredibly. And as for striking, that's an interesting one. I would take Anthony Johnson's punching, or no, actually I'd take Francis Ngannou's punching power. I don't even care about the striking itself. I would just take the punching power, combine that with DJ's speed. You got something crazy.
What else we got from Twitter?
Okay, I'll get one more and then we'll do the promo.
All right. I'm on 14%.
All right.
I'm in the red, though. It just turned red. I'm a little concerned.
All right. I got one here from a good friend, Tragic Bronson, who says, Carolina Kowalkiewicz versus Karate Hottie. Where does this fight put these 2 women? KK is coming off of a devastating KO loss by Jessica Andrade. One that I will say I put on my knockout of the year list for last year. It was in my top 5. That was an underrated knockout. And Watterson is riding a 2-fight win streak and has already been submitted by the champion. Marc, Carolina Kowalkiewicz versus Karate Hottie. That is this weekend on this ESPN card.
Underrated fight. I don't think it's a title eliminator fight, but it's not far off, especially if you consider that Carolina, even though she lost to Andrade, she's beaten Rose Namajunas. And Michelle Watterson is someone that obviously the UFC is pushing, and she's represented by Endeavor, by WME, IMG. So I think they'll give her an opportunity if she wins, possibly to get the title shot. Although I think Tatiana Suarez is also kind of right on the cusp as well, depending on how she does against Nina Ansaroff. So it's a very big fight for the strawweight division, 100%.
And very much flying under the radar.
Very much so.
All right, man. Well, hey, we were able to do it. Let's do a promo real quick before you black out over there.
My promo is going to be very quick because no one really wants to hear it anyway. But I'm gonna tell you because
tell me.
So on Tuesday, Cain Velasquez announced, there was a press conference in Mexico City. He announced that he is making his official transition, and I wouldn't say a transition because he's still going to do MMA. He's still going to fight in the UFC, at least for the time being. But he is going to be an in-ring performer in professional wrestling, which we know that he did a WWE kind of training camp last summer, and he's talked about it. But this is like an unforeseen thing that the former UFC heavyweight champion would go into wrestling a few years ago, and he's going to be making his debut at Triple Mania on August 3rd in Mexico City. It's the Lucha Libre promotion, AAA's big show of the year. It's their WrestleMania, and it's a very big show. It's on like a major network in Mexico, TV Azteca. And this is another big transition of a top name in MMA going over to pro wrestling. And it seems like it has become quite the trend lately. If you look at WrestleMania, WWE's big event of the year, and the Super Bowl, I guess, of pro wrestling, Ronda Rousey's headlining. She's going to be in the first women's headlining match at WrestleMania against Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. And then, of course, Brock Lesnar is on that card. We just mentioned him against Seth Rollins. And if you just look at the two mediums, I don't want to say two sports, the two mediums, MMA and pro wrestling are as close as they've ever been. They've always been very close. And I always see these fan comments, and it just bugs me. Like, just know your history. Look at how many UFC Hall of Famers have performed in pro wrestling. Some of your favorites that you don't even know. Mark Coleman, Don Fry, Bas Rutten were all professional wrestlers as well as MMA fighters in Japan. So know your history. Know that these have always been close cousins in terms of the two mediums together. And Cain Velasquez going into pro wrestling is just the latest version of that. Matt Riddle's in WWE, Shayna Baszler, Jessamine Duke, Marina Shafir. I mean, the list goes on and on of fighters from the UFC doing pro wrestling now. Anthony Gutierrez, Tom Lawler, Eric Spicely, Mitch Clark. I mean, it's the list goes on and on. These are very close mediums. This is not far apart. So stop your belly aching, hardcore MMA fans. It's two sides of the same coin, MMA and pro wrestling. It's always been that way. Get used to it.
Jeez, you just can't.
You don't have to like it, Shaun Al-Shatti, but accept it.
You just can't help yourself. We were going so good. We have a makeshift show with you on the road. Technology's not working, and yet power through. And then you got to come with this. You got to come with the wrestling. Always with the wrestling.
You're damn right.
I expect the comment section to explode with anti-Marc Raimondi sentiment, and I'm here for it. I'm very here for it. But I will do mine really quickly, and then we'll get out of here. So my promo, I want to talk about something that kind of got overshadowed this past week, and we criticize state athletic commissions a lot on this show. In particular, me. I criticize state athletic commissions quite a bit. And in fairness, in my opinion, justifiably most of the time, because most of the time they're just plain terrible, antiquated, draconian, stuck in the past, stuck with their outdated rules, outdated policies, and always healthily, or always with a healthy eagerness to overreach. So because of that, I think it's important for me to commend a state athletic commission when they get something right. And this past week, the Florida State Boxing Commission did exactly that. You might have heard about this story from earlier this month when the Titan FC flyweight champ Juan Puerta was pulled from the main event of a Titan card just minutes before he was going to walk out because of a last-second positive test for cannabis. Titan ended up canceling the main event, basically, of their show midway through the show, and Puerta was suspended indefinitely by the Florida Commission. All of this happened because Florida was behind the times with its actual restrictions on marijuana use generally. They were behind industry doping standards with the amount that you can have in your system, which is all set by WADA. But then, man, something we rarely see these days, a commission acting swiftly and decisively to acknowledge and correct a mistake, actually happened. In less than a week, Florida announced that it will ease its rules regarding cannabis consumption and line them up closer to WADA standard. And that, to me, is news worth sharing. It is not the biggest news, it is not the most earth-shattering development, but I believe it is nonetheless worth celebrating a commission actually realizing they made a mistake, actually owning up to it, and being accountable rather than burying their hand in the sand. I know that's a very crazy concept and how novel of one it is. But hey, kudos to you, Florida. Maybe other state athletic commissions can learn a thing or two from you.
Let me just add two things to that, Shaun. They actually have not announced it yet. They have to do a meeting and kind of vote on it first in early April, and then they'll pass it through. I think it's a formality at this point, and the UFC is saying it's going to happen, and that's their expectation. And I think it was some pressure from the UFC that led to this, because UFC Sunrise is coming up in next month, right? I mean, so that's a big deal for them. And then I agree with your sentiment, as long as they do right by Juan Puerta, the Titan FC flyweight champion, because he got done dirty. he failed the drug test that was like, it didn't even go to a lab. It was like a pop, what they call a pop test. And it came back like within an hour of him taking it. Like, that's not a legitimate test. And they still pulled him from the main event. So I hope they do right by him. We don't know how much cannabis he actually had in his system or not, because again, it was a pop test. It only shows if even like a trace amount comes up. So if they do right by him, I will agree with you, but I'm still waiting to see what Florida actually ends up doing.
Yeah, and I will take back every nice thing I just said if this ends up being not what it is supposed to be, because they, like you said, it seems like a mere formality at this point. If that is indeed the case and that's what ends up playing out, kudos to you, Florida, for actually addressing the issue publicly and swiftly and dealing with it, rather than just kind of doing the old commission thing of sweeping it under the rug and letting the news cycle move on. Well, hey, man, we did it. We did it.
I'm at 6%.
You're at 6%?
6.
Nice. All right. Well, this has been another edition of the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. Sorry for the herky-jerky version of the show that we got today. There were a lot of technological issues we were battling, but at least it worked out in some regard. We didn't want to leave you guys with no show, and we appreciate you guys so much for always tuning in. Next week, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're on next week because you will be on vacation once again.
Okay, once again, yes, because I'm always going on vacation. That's me. Just always on vacation. But
I'm right? Like, we're no show next week?
Unless you want to do it on Tuesday.
Maybe. I don't know. We will figure it out off.
We'll leave that open-ended.
Yeah, we'll figure it out off air and we will let you guys know. If not, no matter what, 2 weeks from now, we'll definitely have a show.
Absolutely.
And hey, this has been the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. My name is Shaun Al-Shatti. That man is Marc Raimondi. He's in Japan. He's going to have killer coverage for one championship debuts of Demetrius Johnson and Eddie Alvarez all week. So look for that on MMA Fighting. In the meantime, man, we love you guys. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the fights. Edson Barboza versus Justin Gaethje is going to be nuts. Let's all have some fun, and we will talk to you soon. Love you guys. See ya.
A-Side.